That, I recognize the chairman for 5 minutes for his questioning.
Thank you, Chairman Tiffany. Thank you, Chief Schultz, again for being here today. If you look back historically over the past 3 or 4 decades, we saw things like the roadless rule in the West and weaponization of the Endangered Species Act result in closures of many mills in the western U.S. As a result of that, we saw increased imports from Canada. We saw no forest management on many of these stands out west, and now we're seeing catastrophic wildfires. Now, I know the chart that was referred to, it's just data. It shows how much was harvested over time, and it shows how many wildfires we've had. And we also know that correlation doesn't mean causation, but I think I could explain why there's actually causation to the correlation. I just want to give you a minute to explain why you think there is or is not causation with the correlation on the chart, if you want to hold the chart back up.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Westerman, thank you for the question. So I think if you look at what happened, if you go back to the late 80s, the Forest Service was harvesting about 12 billion board feet a year. And then the spotted owl decision came out right around that time, 88, 89, and you see a precipitous decline in timber that was offered. And there was about an 80% reduction. So we have to keep in mind when we talk about timber sales on the National Forest, I made the comment a minute ago, it's not just saw log removal. When you look at any timber sale contract that the Forest Service offers, especially if it's a stewardship contract, there is a tremendous amount of work that is done, including removal of non-saw material as a part of those contracts. So the work that was being done when we look at those timber harvest numbers was not just removal of saw logs walking past all this other material. There was, whether it was burned, whether it was brought out of the forest, but there was a lot of other forest management that was occurring in addition to saw log removal that did, I would argue that it did have an impact on the fires. And the other thing you got to keep in mind, when you have active management going on, you have contractors in the woods. People tend to forget this. Logging contractors, in many cases, can be first responders. So they're the first ones to see a smoke out there, and in many cases, if they have a timber sale contract, their contract requires that they put the fire out if they're somehow in their vicinity of their timber sale unit. So having people on the landscape, it's kind of like having ranchers that have permits on Forest Service ground or BLM ground. If there's a fire, those ranchers, having that person on the landscape is going to be much more effective in putting that fire out than not having people in the landscape. So I would argue that a couple things. One, that overall forest management and reducing fuel loads and reducing the overall saw log volume, both of those things contributed to some of that. And then what you see happen is that we have this precipitous decline, and we're down to roughly 2.5 to 3 billion board feet from a 12 billion board foot harvest level. And we can argue, was 12 the right number? But I would argue that the level we're at right now, we need to do more to protect our communities, and both from a wildfire mitigation perspective as well as in terms of rebuilding some of the infrastructure in the rural communities that we have.
And from a forest dynamic standpoint, we can't forget that a forest fire acts as a clear cut. So what grows back is going to be an even age stand where everything's the same diameter, and if it doesn't have room to grow, it's going to remain a small diameter and be subject to insects and disease attack. So the need to get in and manage the forest is critical. But as I said earlier, we got into a bit of a death spiral where we took the ability to manage away, we took the markets away, and now we can't get, if we could manage, there's nothing to do with the material because the mills are gone. In the reconciliation bill, we put a 20-year stewardship contract provision in. Can you explain how that could help draw industry back so that people would invest in mills, whether it be to process biomass or to process larger diameter?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Westerman, a couple things to think about. I don't care what business you're in. What you want from government is certainty, right? If you're a regulator, you want regulatory certainty. If in the business of the Forest Service, we're providing supply, industry needs certainty. The Forest Service needs to do what we say we're going to do. So what a 20-year timber sale contract does, it provides certainty. And with certainty comes deployment of capital, right? If you have certainty of supply, and if you're in the wood products industry, that is problem number one. You have to demonstrate you have certainty of supply. Without that, you're not going to make that investment. So whether you're investing in an existing mill or an existing facility, trying to expand that. You might add a second line, you might upgrade the line, or if you're looking to attract new capital into an area, if people know that there's not just supply, but there's certainty of that, bringing that supply to market is going to be key. It's not a panacea, right? That we know there's other things that affect markets. There's trade policies and different things, but I would argue that if the Forest Service provides certainty of supply, that will encourage investment in some areas, or it will continue the investment that has occurred.
Thank you. I yield back.